Brilliant. Okay, good. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for arriving on the dot. That's great. Hopefully you're able to see my slides. Yes, you are. I can see on my other laptop, so that's brilliant. So welcome to this month's session, which is all around leading with certainty, inspiring confidence, and empowering change. We are recording, and the intention is for us to share afterwards. So please don't share anything too sort of commercially sensitive or personal, but it would also be lovely to get some interaction with you. And a big thank you to those of you who have completed our registration questionnaire and given us a little bit of insight into what you'd like from the session and where you're at. I'm just very quickly going to share some anonymous sort of overview slides from that to give you an idea of what we've taken from you. So what's your biggest challenge when leading your team through uncertainty? The biggest one here is maintaining team morale. And then two coming in next, communicating a clear vision and adapting to changing circumstances. So I thought that was really interesting, actually, that it was very much about the team morale aspect. Then in terms of the primary factor affecting your ability to stay on course with your company's vision, I suppose not too surprisingly, we've got the biggest scoring one is limited resources. That's a universal challenge in these difficult times, but also this idea of leaders giving clarity and getting people aligned with that. Then we have, which of these leadership traits do you find challenging to embody? The biggest one here is encouraging collaboration in decisions, which was a little bit surprising for us. So we'll explore that a little bit more going forwards in the session. And then delegating responsibility for decisions, closely followed by the other two, which you can read for yourself. So this how we engage people and actually give them more responsibility for decision making seems to be an interesting theme. And then which type of practical tips would you find most valuable from the workshop? Fairly even spread, but again, interesting a little bit more on boosting team confidence and engagement, and then strategies for balancing confidence with robust analysis. So we're definitely going to cover some of that. We've only got 45 minutes, and so we're only going to have a light touch on some of these things. It's going to be the beginning of a conversation, but we're very much looking forward to getting started with you. So with that in mind, our agenda for the session is leading with confidence and purpose in uncertain times. The power of vision, providing direction whilst also embracing adaptability, being able to change direction. We're going to explore a couple of paradoxes, insightful curiosity and vigilant resilience. And we're going to give you some practical tips that you can take away and use straight away. So getting into the content, certainty. Certainty is not about avoiding the unknown, but being in a position where you feel confident to navigate it. So it's about having a position, a hypothesis, a perspective, and then using that to help us to ride the waves, to ride out the storm, to be able to change direction when that becomes appropriate, with very much this important idea that we've got a vision, a guiding star ahead. So we know where we're trying to get to. And therefore, that gives us that facility to adapt to change and to the conditions that present. So we'd like to get you involved, and we'd like to get a sense of how you're feeling in terms of uncertainty and change. So if you can either do this with your mobile phone, and the camera should be able to read the QR code, or you can use your phone or a browser on your computer, if you open another window, to go to menti.com and use the code that's at the top. And it would be lovely to just get your thoughts on how you feel about the year ahead. And I'm going to mute someone I can hear. So Helen, I've just muted you. So if you need to speak, do please unmute. It just keeps the airways clear a little bit. Here we go.
If you can hear me in the meantime, we'd love to see you. So do put on your camera if you can, because then we can have more of an engaging conversation. Okay, so that's interesting to see. Excited, good. Cautiously optimistic, good. That's
So we've
9
got
people.
8,
Yep.
9 so far out of
Well,
about 14. So we're getting there. Good.
yep.
Optimistics, really good to see optimistic up there. And we're gonna touch on the importance of optimism a little bit later. Sharon, thanks for your note. That's no problem at all. It's good to know you're there. Good. So that looks like that slowed down. So we've got optimistic, but apprehensive and anxious also. Cautiously optimistic. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And excited. Excited is always a good one. We say to people when they're about to go on stage, don't talk about being nervous, talk about being excited. Turn that energy into something positive. So that's good. So we've got some worried, some anxious, some nervous, as well as some hopeful and cautious. Okay, so a bit of a mixed bag. And that's probably what we would expect, particularly this early on in the year. Okay. Oh, more coming in. I'm going to move us on to the next slide, which is about how slightly different. How confident do you feel about leading your team through uncertainty this year? And you've got a slider that you should be able to slide along on this one. Not seeing any responses. Is it proving problematic?
I don't think it's come up on the app or on the.
Oh, no.
Let me just do a quick check as well, Ali.
I think you just need to do a refresh of the app and it'll bring it up.
Was that an instruction to us or to participants?
I think if you log back in,
Yeah.
or refresh, then that'll work.
I'm just getting the first question again,
Are
Ali.
you? Okay.
So if I put,
Let me click, see if that helps.
how do you feel about the year ahead? Yeah, Ali, I'm seeing that.
Ah, okay. Do you know what? I'm not going to worry. I'm going to say, let's do a different thing. How confident do you feel about leading your team through uncertainty this year on a scale of 0 to 10 in the chat, please? So just give me a number between 0 and 10, where 0 is not at all. 8, 7, 6, 7. So I think the lowest score I'm seeing there is a 5. We're getting some 10s, 6s and 7s. So towards the positive end. So if we were on a scale, it would be up about here. Okay. Good.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see that, see how that goes. Yeah.
So David, let's talk a little bit about leading with confidence and purpose in uncertain times.
Yeah, it's really important that as we were looking through this, we were looking at the principle of being able to have a clear direction and then being able to adjust around that. Because a lot of people go, oh, well, it's too uncertain. We can't necessarily say exactly what our vision will be. We can't look that far ahead. And what we're finding is, and what the brain science says, is that it's better to have clarity of saying we're going to do this for this year, even if it's only just for this year. But it doesn't mean that you're not going to adjust as you go. So if you could just go to the next slide. We know that from a neuroscience point of view, bad is stronger than good. Now, this is by a lot of research by David Rock at the Neuro Leadership Institute. We love his work. It's really good stuff. But, you have all survived plagues in your genes, have all survived plagues, pandemics, wars, you name it, so that you have actually survived, so that your genes are with you today because you're alert to danger. And our brains are always on the lookout for anything that might go wrong. In fact, it's 5 times more alert to that than it is to a reward. So if you think about the implications for this for leadership, is that if they don't emphasize the good, emphasize what the focus is, where we're going, and the rewards that come from that, you have to go through a lot of negativity, a lot of threat response that people are naturally going to be gravitating towards. And if you think about it, social media is just so full of all the negative stuff because our brains are geared to absorb that and pay attention to it. So leaders need to be really clear about and intentional about being clear about what the vision is and the rewards that are going to come from achieving that vision. So if you go to the next slide, the SCARF model is one worth looking at, and we invite you to, we're doing a little light touch on these things. We'll invite you to explore these things later, and we're happy to have a chat with you about it as well. But the SCARF model is great. It's a great way of remembering 5 key primary threats and rewards. So if you just go through the list, Alli, there's status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And you can see there that the second in the list is certainty, because our brains actually begin to seize up if we are in a situation which is uncertain, and it creates a massive stressor. If you think back to the pandemic and how uncertain everything was and how everyone was stressed, and how interestingly, socially now, more and more we're beginning to see bus stops where and even traffic lights where we're being told what the countdown is to our next bus. So we're not sitting there all agitated. So if I know I'm going to Waterloo, I go, okay, I got 14 minutes. I can do something with that. I can relax and know that that's actually something I can do. So socially, we're beginning to look at how we can engineer clarity and certainty so people can then free up their brains to be creative. And as leaders, we need to give that to people, because people actually don't mind. A lot of the studies show once there's clarity and certainty, they don't mind if it needs adjustment, because they know, yeah, we're still going in this direction. We're just going to go over here for a while and then turn back into the direction focus. So to the next slide, Alli.
Fingers crossed.
So again, just to hear from you, what's the biggest uncertainty in your business is facing this year? If you could just see that that works, let's just all log in and check that. I'm going to do it here myself as well, just to make sure that it's working. Okay. So you got there, short answers are recommended. You got 200 characters to write. See a couple of things, see what people say. And as we said before, you can do this either on your phone or on your desktop. Okay, impacts of restructure. And that can create a lot of uncertainty. Restructures are always an anxiety-ridden time. So we need to be really clear about the outcomes that we're looking for and the benefits of the restructure. Yeah, we totally get the financial constraints, securing customers, absolutely. Business development, always, everyone needs to be in that mode all the time. Yeah, knowing where to market and who to. Interesting about new strategy, because that again can create some uncertainty. We know that a lot of our clients at the moment are working through strategy, and it hurts your brain to think about all of these possible futures and which choices you should make, because ultimately creating a strategy is about making choices about and prioritizing specific actions over others. But once you've got your strategy and your top team can agree it, then everyone is you can release the energy. If there isn't a clear strategy and there isn't a clear direction, you're actually, you're clogging up people's brains with doubt and other thoughts. And remember, bad is 5 times greater than good. So without that clarity, you're really messing around with people's heads and they're not able to be creative and think clearly.
And it's really, I think there's a really interesting thread there too around, recovery of consumer confidence and securing customers and revenue variability. So much of our ability to lead and lead with certainty is dependent upon the actions of others, the actions of our customers, our partners, and what have you. And we're living in a very uncertain economic climate at the moment, which makes it hard for people to commit to spend with us as businesses. And that in turn makes it hard for us to have certainty that things are going to be okay. But our people really need that certainty that things are going to be okay, even if we can't show them the evidence that it's rock solid and sort of in the bag and across the line, as it were. I think it's a huge
That's
challenge.
the thing, which links very nicely, Ali, what you were just saying there. I know we're going to talk about it later, but the whole piece about the connection, we're doing a lot of talking about this, the connection between certainty and optimism, and also to have that realistic optimism, which we're going to be talking about in a minute.
Okay, so we've got this sense that our degree of certainty is going to very much influence the way we lead. And it's hard to be certain at the moment. Things are challenging. And I think also since the pandemic, there's this sort of underlying sense of, well, if that can happen, anything can happen. And that sort of undermines our certainty to a degree. And one of the most important things, I use a lot a metaphor of sort of being in a sailing ship going towards a particular destination. And we know one of the things we can be certain of is if we set off from Southampton in a big sailing ship to try and reach Barbados, we know that it's going to be challenging. We know we're going to hit some challenges with the weather and the tides and what have you, but we don't know where they're going to be or when. But the important thing is that we've got some clarity of what it's going to look like when we get there, right? We know it's, and I'm not quite sure why I chose Barbados. I've never been there. But in my head, the vision is that it's going to be beautiful and sunny and calm, and we're all going to have a wonderful time. And I'm really excited, enthusiastic about the journey to get there, even though I may have some uncertainty about quite what that's going to give us. And I may be able to turn that uncertainty into a little bit of excitement. It might be a little bit of an adventure. So the vision is the thing that keeps us moving forwards in a particular direction, even if we know chances are we're going to have to tack a little bit and take different directions along the way. And that our strategy actually will become an emergent strategy depending upon what happens as we go. Yeah, we might, well, I don't know, we might break a mast. We might have to put into port for a couple of weeks somewhere that we didn't expect to. And that might give us some opportunities to see some fantastic places along the way, right? That's our emergent strategy. As long as we're moving in that direction, we'll be okay. And the people, the crew on our sailing ship are going to be engaged with that journey, and they're going to understand how they play a part in moving us in that direction. So, what is one aspect of your current vision or strategy that you think needs more clarity?
Everybody see the change? Oh yeah, I've got the change as well on my phone. That's good. Yeah. Stability. While everybody else is filling that out, would you like to say a little bit more about what you mean by that? That stability needs more clarity. The importance of stability, or?
I guess it's one thing having a vision or strategy, which is great, and yes, it can adapt. But I think it's nice to have a very few or a couple of things that actually you can get behind. And so there are lots of there is a holistic view.
Yeah.
And there are many work streams contributing to that goal. But there's maybe priority perhaps as well, is linked to stability, which is it's very difficult to know which horse to get behind at which time, and that is quite distracting. And there's bigger things ongoing that some really important decisions that haven't been made because everyone's looking for better alternatives. So the perfect is becoming the own enemy of the good in many ways, and
that's an important point. Yes.
Yeah, and so we just kind of stymied by lack of progress because nothing is really going ahead wholeheartedly and not being implemented.
And you touch on a number of very important points there about knowing what is stable. So even in the uncertainty that we have and the economic stuff, and goodness me, are we going to be affected by tariffs or whatever Trump is up to next, is to say, well, what are the bits that are stable, and being able to, as a leadership team, to recognize that and promote those things so people go, yeah, these are our anchors. These things aren't going to change. So that people can then, so in many ways, we always look back to what's going to help our brains relax enough to be able to make the important decisions, and stay creative. Because if our brain is too activated with threat, we're just not going to be creative.
And I think, again, there's an interesting theme in here, which doesn't entirely surprise me, that creating a vision, actually, I think generally most organizations find reasonably straightforward. The strategy to reach that vision is where we can really get stuck. And it's hard. I wrote a LinkedIn post this morning along these lines in response to something. You know, it takes a lot of really hard thinking to develop a clear strategy. And it's particularly challenging to communicate, to capture and communicate that strategy in a really simple, clear way. And so when it comes to implementing the strategy, if we haven't communicated it really clearly and we don't have a communication to refer back to, or maybe a visual. I mean, I'm a big fan of let's get the strategy visually on a single page that we can talk around. It's really hard for people to understand what's expected of them and the part they play, and why actually this seemingly tedious and mundane job you've given me is really actually vital for us to implement that strategy and move us towards that vision. So although it's hard to get to the strategy, it really, really is worth it in the end, because it then supports your engagement with your team. And that's the thing that's going to get us there at the end of the day. So it gives us those clear steps. It makes people feel relevant. Avatars is another one. So pinning your colors to the mast, right? Which one of these avatars are we going to prioritize to drive our strategy, I think is interesting. And that links to a more defined and clear offer. So I think there are some interesting threads there. I'd love to explore those more, but I'd like to move us on because we only have time to really get started on some of these things, unfortunately. So we're going to now talk about how paradox plays a part in all of this. And I've got another, I don't know why we've ended up with a boat and sailing sort of metaphor behind all of this, because it's really not my thing. I know nothing about them at all. Give me 4 wheels and an engine and I'm in business. But anyway, this one works really well for paradox, because if we're racing yachts, we've got choices to be made and priorities to decide upon. Because if we want speed, we need a narrow hull because it has less resistance and it cuts through the water. But the narrower our hull, the less stability we have. And if we want stability, we need a broad hull, but it's going to slow us down. So it's about optimizing. We want both stability and speed. And we get to a point where almost we can't change either way from that optimal point. But the catamaran provides us with that creative, innovative, out-of-the-box solution to those constraints, because it's 2 narrow hulls. So we get the speed, but because they're set apart, we also have stability, although these guys are clearly pushing that to its limits. I've never been on one. It looks just incredible. So the thing about paradox then is that we've got 2 competing demands, 2 competing tensions or factors that are in tension. And what we need to do is not go with one or the other, but to have both this and that. So paradoxical thinking is largely about both and thinking, not either or thinking. And we're going to introduce two particular paradoxes today that derive from a behavioral tool that we use, but in general terms, I think they're really interesting to illustrate our behavioral preferences. So the first is the paradox of insightful curiosity, which is the tendency to explore different viewpoints and make conclusions. And up the left, we have the behavior, the trait of certain, which is the tendency to feel confident in one's opinions. And along the bottom, we have open and reflective, the tendency to reflect on many different points of view. So if we are both certain and open and reflective, if we were scoring with a low score at the bottom left up to a high score on certain and across to the right with a high score on open reflective, we get this really useful, powerful trait of truth exploring. And really that looks like, look, I'm confident in my opinion. I have an opinion on this. I have reason to be confident in it. I've done my research. I know something about this subject. And I'm really interested to know what you think, because if you think something different, I respect your opinion. And I'm really curious to understand what you're seeing that maybe I'm missing. And depending on the robustness of what you then describe to me as the basis of your opinion, I'm open to changing my opinion to a new one. And I can do that even though I was pretty confident I was right in the first place. And this truth exploring trait is really, really powerful. It's like a superpower for leaders. It really, really is. And if we had more of this truth exploring going on in boardrooms across the country, I think we would be in a much better position. So we're curious to know how you see your own tendencies in terms of being certain and open and reflective. And on this slide, you should have a little pin that you should be able to move around and think about whether, well, do you see yourself in that truth exploring quadrant? Or maybe you see yourself as a little bit more certain than your tendency to be open reflective, which would lead to this quadrant that we label dogmatic. You might be perceived by others to be a little dogmatic. Or conversely, if you think you're maybe higher on open and reflective than you are on certain, then some people might perceive that to be a little inconclusive. Always open to the views of others, never perhaps bringing that together into a firm view. We're starting to get some results coming in. Now, whilst I give you some time to do that, it's important to note that we are not one thing all the time and in all different contexts. So where you've put your score around that, we might have quite a significant size, about the size actually of this quadrant, of your behavioural range. And with some people, you might be more certain than you are with others. So you might be more certain with your team than perhaps you are when you then go into a senior leadership team context. So your certainty is going to vary a little. Your tendency to be open reflective is going to vary a little. Good. So we've got 9 scores in, and we're seeing quite a lot of you up in this truth exploring quadrant, which is great. A few of you aware that perhaps your certainty is a little low. And I have to say, anecdotally, that's what we're seeing at the moment. We're actually seeing that in general terms, certain scores have dropped a little. And of course, any of you, even if you're scoring sort of here, which is actually about a 7 on our scale that goes up to 10, in some contexts at some time, you may well drop down into this inconclusive zone. This person here, you're going to have a behavioural range that means at some points, some people might find your behaviour a little dogmatic. So it'd be worth thinking about whether you could be more open and reflective. Good. Thanks for sharing. That's really interesting.
It is very interesting. Yeah. And it's great to be able to have a team and have a discussion about this, because in a leadership team, if you were all together running a business together, we would emphasize that the people who are down in the low certain score are given the opportunity to share their thoughts, their conclusions. What is it that they're seeing that we might be missing? Because if we're all going, yeah, we're all open and reflective, and that's great, and we're also certain, and we're moving things forward, truth exploring, there are some voices that aren't being heard as clearly as they could be. And if you think about it, that's happened in business so much, where, you know, the engineer who came up with the digital camera was stomped on by the marketing department at Kodak because we don't want that. We do film. That'll erode our business. Well, yeah, it eroded the company, not progressing that. And so many names have gone from the high street because leadership teams have got very certain about we're right, we know what we're doing, and not letting those other voices in. And it's really important in any team to be aware of who maybe not giving their opinions as much, and how to tease that out and make sure they contribute to the group.
And just a little thought occurs to me. If you're interested in pushing up your certain score, do drop us a line, because we've got a little self-service course on our T4P Academy that we can give you access to for free, just to do some sort of self-coaching exercises to help you kind of build that muscle, if you like.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's our first paradox, insightful curiosity. And then
we have it for open and reflective as well.
of course, but most of those scores were higher. Yeah. So, David, would you like to talk to us about the paradox of vigilant resilience?
I would. Yeah, this is a really also quite a fascinating one, because, well, they're all fascinating, but we thought this would have a lot to do with what we're talking about today with regards to this element of certainty, but also this element of being optimistic. So the paradox of vigilant resilience is all about the tendency to be optimistic while also being prudent regarding emerging issues. And that's this bit about adaptability, to go, what else is going on that I need to be mindful of? Because optimistic, in the tool that we use, the definition is the tendency to believe that the future will be positive. So even in the darkest moments, I'm still looking for, yes, we can do this. I have a belief that things will work out, even though it might be tough. But I'm not letting that distract me, because I'm also acutely aware of scrutinizing potential difficulties related to a plan or a strategy. Because as you can see, as Ali said as well, if I'm very optimistic without analyzing pitfalls, other people might see me as blindly optimistic, like it's all great. Well, maybe not. However, a lot of businesses fall into the trap, especially interesting certain types of professional services where their job is to analyze pitfalls. They can become very skeptical. And that means that they fall into analyzing the pitfalls without looking at or communicating the benefits of any plan or strategy. And really what we want to do is we want to get to this realistic optimism, where we know we can be optimistic and believe that the future is bright, but we're not deluding ourselves. We're very clear that there are challenges, there is a lack of resources, or there are uncertainties in the market, but we can, at least as leaders, go, we've got the capability to get through this. And it's a very interesting true story. It's called about the Stockdale paradox, because Stockdale was incarcerated by the Vietnamese during the Vietnam War. And he was incarcerated for 5 years, but he survived and managed to get out. But he told a very interesting story when he left, which was that a lot of the people who he was captured with were all saying, oh, it's going to be fine. We're going to be out by Easter. And then Easter came and they weren't out. They weren't, freed. And they said, oh, we'll be out by Christmas. We'll be out by Christmas. It's going to be okay. We're all going to be out by Christmas. And he was going like, no, we're in a really dire situation here. I'm going to keep my optimism, but I also need to keep myself alive. And he was the only one who survived, because he said, actually, very sadly, that a lot of the others, after 5 years of Easter and Christmas and other things, birthdays passing by, people lost hope and their blind optimism was shattered, and they actually died from a broken heart of not getting what they expected to get. Where he managed to stay resilient by going like, I'm in a really dire situation. So as leaders, we need to be acutely aware of what's going on that's dangerous and potentially very harmful, but also to maintain that optimism so that we can keep our brains creative. And that's really the thing. If we get too much into the analyzed pitfalls, we're triggering our amygdala, which is all about the fear of threats. It means that actually we're closing down our brain. We're less creative. We're making less connections in our brain. And we're getting a very pessimistic bias. So we think everything is going to go wrong, and it can get generalized across the board. So we really need to work on maintaining optimism while being vigilant of what might be going on with things that might go wrong. So let's have a look at where you score yourselves. Basically, if you think on that's certain. Did we go the wrong way? Just think about while we're getting that slide up for you. What's your score on analyzes pitfalls? How good are you at doing that? How much do you enjoy doing that? And what's your level of optimism at the moment? So, Ali, we're in the wrong slide.
Oh, are we? I'm so sorry. I was multitasking in the chat.
No, did something?
There's
Ooh.
something very strange going on. Yeah, it's not going to refresh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I'm just clicking backwards and forwards to see if I can make it change, but it's not going to change on my PowerPoint.
So what I've got, let's do an alternative. If we go back to the slide before, Ali,
yeah,
let's just try this. So just on the annotate, you should have on the bottom of your screen, or depending, I think it's on a Mac, you can have the top. There should be an annotate button
yeah, in the menu.
in the menu.
You should be able to just do a stamp or get a little drawing pen and do a little dot. Oh, I just drew a line.
Yeah, just put a little dot or a squiggle or something there where you see yourself as on those, if you can see that. Can everybody see the annotate button?
No. So on a PC, if you go to the bottom of your screen, you should get a menu, and if you go to
No, I'm not seeing it there either.
I can see it on the Mac. I can't see it on the PC anymore. Okay, let's not worry.
Well, some people have it, but
So the other simple option is just pop into the chat for me which quadrant you think your behavioural range would most likely be centred in. Would you be in realistic optimism or sceptical or blindly optimistic? Oh, I can see one person's managed to get that on there. Yeah. Thanks, Adam. So we've got some messages going in the chat. So if you can't draw it on the screen, let's just get it in the chat. So we've got a sceptical.
number of realistic optimisms. Good.
Realistic optimisms. Good.
And the thing we want you to remember about the realistic optimism bit is that balance of freeing up your brain and freeing up your people's brains to be creative, to be able to problem solve, to be able to use their prefrontal cortex. Because if we're just stuck in our amygdala where we're fearful of what might go wrong, and think about all the pessimistic, people might leave and choose to go somewhere else, so you lose the resource, but also they can't think creatively. They end up only getting stuck in a loop of not uncertainty and negative bias. So it's really important to think about how you can harness the energy of people's brains with your optimism while being alert to any pitfalls that may be on the horizon.
Okay, good. So I have an eye on the time. So I'm going to move us on. And we've previewed this a little bit. So some of you will be very familiar with this. This is the clarity matrix that we've developed, which is kind of our map of the world and in terms of how organizations work. And we need to clear
all the annotations. Yeah.
I'm not. Can you do that?
No. I'm not sure why I can't.
Not to worry. We're going to ignore them, David.
Okay.
I'm sure we can see through them. So what this clarity matrix gives us is some more of these paradoxes, these competing tendencies. So we know that there are competing demands on leaders to focus on the performance day to day, and actually it can be really hard to find the time and the energy to focus on the strategy. And then also we have a tension between the competing demands of the people in the business and the needs of the business. And that gives us 4 quadrants. And if we start with the business strategy quadrant, this is where we focus on the stuff that we've been largely talking about today around having a clarity of purpose, of vision of success, and the strategy and the culture that we need to implement that strategy in order to get us there. Once we have clarity around that, we can then get more specific about what does that mean for the people aspects of the business? How do we need to be organized? What do we need to look for in terms of selecting people to be a good fit with their role? How do we need to support them in terms of their development and their engagement? And in terms of what we've been talking about today, there's been an awful lot about this idea of actually, without that clarity of purpose, vision, and strategy, it's very hard to engage people. And unless we've got engagement, we don't then get our performance. So, and in terms of leadership, to be effective as a leader, we need to have this confidence, this certainty combined with an openness. We need to have this optimism combined with this tendency to look for what might go wrong. And we need to equip our teams and our managers and every individual with those skills. And then in our fourth quadrant, which looks at the business performance, this is where we measure the outcome of what we achieve. Are we where we expected to be against our strategy? Have the things that have gone wrong put us off track? Or maybe we've managed to latch on to and catch a fair wind and we're further ahead than we were. And all of that analysis enables us to evaluate the success of what we're doing and drives change, which drives us back into our first quadrant. So, David, would you like to summarize our tips from today for leading with certainty?
Yeah, thanks. So again, it's this balance of certainty and openness, and so a lot of people, especially in senior positions, often feel certain about stuff, but don't let other people know how open they really are to ideas. So sometimes you need to educate the rest of the team or people who work with you, for you, that you are actually open, because it's very easy for people in a slightly more subordinate position to go, oh, they won't listen to me, when in fact you're totally open to listening. You just happen to be very confident in your opinions, but it doesn't mean that you're not open to being challenged. So we often have to emphasize with leaders to say, make sure you're educating your people about how open you really are. Do you want a proper, robust case to be presented to you? And likewise, we've said about having clarity of the direction, because that frees up people's brains to go, yeah, I know this is where we're going. However, we may adjust and have that adaptability along the way in order to tack with the wind or whatever's happening in the economy and do something else for a while we steer around a storm or steer around a particular obstacle that's being created by something beyond our control, like a pandemic. And ultimately, being able to know that you can handle the situation. So confidence, when I looked at it, and when I was on one of the neuroscience courses I was on, I was fascinated by that. Confidence actually comes from knowing I'll be able to handle whatever shows up. It's the people who are going like, oh, if that happens, I'm not sure I'll be able to do anything about it. That's what erodes our confidence. And you want to be able to, as a leader, be able to show people that you're confident because you'll deal with whatever shows up, but you've got a healthy caution, or some people said, being able to make calculated risks, so that you've got that balance of confidence, but also alert and caution. And the last one, as we've said, being realistically optimistic, showing that you're optimistic, showing you believe in the business, the possibility of achieving the vision, but that you're realistic about what's going on around you. And you talk about those things, but you talk about them and frame them within a sense of optimism that you're going to get through it by working together. So really, we'd just like to wrap up, because we're on time to wrap up. You can discover your clarity score. So Alli was talking about the clarity matrix. It's a very simple 16-question exercise. And we'd love you to try that out, because you get instant feedback. The way we've designed it, whatever you score, depending on the scores that you give yourself, you'll get different levels of feedback about what you can do to improve your score. Book a free consultation. We're very happy to chat to you. We've really scratched the surface of a number of areas. If you're interested in your own paradoxes, or the paradox or where your team scores, in touch. We're very happy to talk to you about that and see how easy it is to do. And come to the next workshop. It's at 12:30 on Wednesday, the 26th of February. Put it in your diary. And it's interesting that in this, going all the way back to the beginning, we saw a lot of people were talking about the need for engagement and boosting morale. And we're going to be taking that theme of engagement and doing a deep dive into some aspects of engagement on the next workshop. So watch this space. We'll be communicating that with you over the next couple of weeks.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. David, would you like to turn off the recording?